Now we're going to be touching upon a subject here which I've given a great deal of thought on how best to approach. The motives of the soldiers during the Civil War. Now, some of this is going to be my own thoughts, and also a good chunk of this is going to be paraphrasing some of the words of the late historian Shelby Foote, because I think he sums it up a lot better than I could. Now, I've actually heard it, what you'll hear nowadays from a lot of modern historians, that the Confederate soldiers were all fighting for the institution of slavery. I actually heard one modern historian go on the record as to say that in his view, everyone who wore the Confederate uniform did so on the premises that they thought they were superior to another man, and they were fighting deliberately to keep them in servitude. That is one of the most absurd things I have ever heard. Most of the soldiers, well, I will say yes, it is no doubt in my mind that the goal of the Confederate Congress and the fire eaters from South Carolina to make sure that slavery was preserved. Most of the soldiers on both sides, it didn't really matter to them. And let's break it down a little further, because as Shelby Foote broke it down this way, because one time they were asking a soldier in the South, why are you fighting this war? And he responded, I'm fighting because you're down here. If you're going to come down into my community, in my neighborhood, and create a ruckus, you're going to have me to deal with. That was pretty much what the underlying tone for why most Southerners actually put on the uniform, was to defend their home states. Yes, they were very openly fighting for slavery, but most of the soldiers on both sides did not care. Whereas they asked the Union soldiers, like, why are you fighting this war? And they'd say, well, you're fighting against the promises of my government. You're trying to tear down what my nation stands for, and I can't stand for that. So it wasn't until President Lincoln made it actually formally about slavery in 1863 that it came to the forefront of the war. Because up until that point, most people weren't actually thinking about it. They weren't thinking on either side when they were putting on their uniforms to fight every day. That's a subject that came up a little bit later in the war. But I do like the way it was worded by Mr. Foote when he said, those who say the war had nothing to do with slavery are just as incorrect as those who say the war had everything to do with slavery. It was a major issue. And it goes without saying that if slavery was not an issue, you probably would have had almost none of the chance of none of the southern states seceding, because almost every other problem they had against the federal government could have been fixed within the parameters of the Congress and the political system that was in place. It was when they felt that their entire way of life was threatened by what they viewed as a threat to the abolitionist party. It's when they felt they were out of options, so they felt they had to jump ship. So that was their reason, not speaking for it or against it. So those who say it's not had nothing to do are just as wrong as those who say had everything to do. So it's for you to decide based on the evidence there. There you go.